One Islanders RFA signs a new contract, one files for arbitration. But we're going to talk about the impact of this offseason and one big change we've seen from the team as a result. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us and talk a little Islanders hockey today. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show. The Islanders sign one free agent, another RFA goes to arbitration. We'll talk about one huge difference that is important to this team that has changed since this offseason, and we'll talk a little bit about the relationship between Patrick Roy and Anthony Duclair. So plenty to discuss on today's show. So let's get started with the 2 moves that happened over the weekend just to get everybody caught up with the news. And the first was that the New York Islanders signed Mark Gatcomb to a 1-year, one-way, $900,000 contract. And I got to say, I like this move. I am not saying that Mark Gatcomb is going to be, a 30-goal scorer in this league, but for a fourth line on a team that last year lacked physicality, when they inserted Gatkam into the lineup, he certainly gave them a boost and gave the fourth line some physicality that they desperately needed and a different tone to the game. He was also productive, albeit in limited ice time. 39 games, 8 goals, 9 points. Now, okay, it's a small sample size. He's not averaging a lot of ice time. The shooting percentage was extremely high. But, that's a pace for 16, 17 goals over the course of 82 games if he were to play them all. I love the fact that he was physical, and realistically, in spite of playing a little less than half the games this season, Mark Gatcomb finished second on the Islanders in hits with 149. That is very impressive. Will Gatcomb be guaranteed a spot on the roster? Maybe, maybe not. There is a crowd. There are more than 12 bona fide NHL forwards ready. There's probably 14 or 15, but I think Gatkam adds something that this team needs to the bottom 6. And I think I could see like Cizikas, Gatkam, and Heineman would be a very physical, tenacious fourth line that would give this team back some of the juice that they had when the identity line was in its prime as an effective fourth line, the so-called best fourth line in hockey, and I would love to see that. Meanwhile, while Gatkam is back and will fight for a roster spot, and by the way, he, basically is going to have to win a job, but the other remaining RFA for the Islanders, and they had 4 going in. Well, that's Maxim Ciplakov, and Tsyplakov did file for arbitration. Now, again, it's not the end of the world in the sense that it doesn't even mean there's going to be a case. It would be in August. More often than not, the player and the team end up signing something before the actual hearing takes place. If there is a hearing, we're talking about a 1 or maybe 2-year deal. But the problem with these hearings is that, basically the player goes into the hearing and says, hey, this is why my client and his agent, this is why my client deserves X number of dollars. You compare him to another player who's making that kind of money, and you say, hey, pay my guy, he's worth this. And then the team has to come back and counter as to why the player is not worth that kind of money. Sometimes things are said that can have an adverse effect on the relationship between the player and the team. I'm not that worried about it. Like Gatkam, Tsyplakov is going to be battling for a spot on the team. I mean, I think Tsyplakov will be in the lineup every day, assuming he's with the Islanders next year. But if he stumbles, they have other players now, including the newly signed Maxim Ciplov, who could just sort of step in and take that role. Now, I like what we saw from Tsyplakov as a rookie. He scored 10 goals, 35 points, was a +4 in 77 games. Does a lot of the other things that you like to see from a middle six player right. He is relatively sound defensively. He can be physical when he needs to be. Had 140 hits, which ties him for 4th on the team with J.G. Pageau. He can help out a bit on the power play and hopefully takes even a bigger role there this year. And as he adjusts to life in the NHL, Tsyplakov can still get to be maybe a second line winger on this team if he is comfortable enough to play and be not as effective as the 30 goals he scored in the KHL. But could I easily see him getting to 20 this year? Maybe even at some point 25 in the NHL? Yeah. So here is a useful player who should continue to grow in his second season in the NHL. You don't want to overpay. You don't want to go nuts here because you're still paying for potential rather than production. But you don't want to disrespect him and you don't want to alienate him either. So hopefully, the Islanders and Maxim Ciplakov's agent will reach an agreement before arbitration. And whether it's a 1-year deal, a 2-year deal, they'll reach some kind of an agreement. Now, the thing that may complicate matters a little bit, Ciplakov can be an unrestricted free agent after this season. So if the Islanders want to sign him to a 2-year deal or more, you're talking about a situation where he's giving up a potential year of unrestricted free agency. And that's where, if you do a 1-year deal, it's worth whatever. If you do a 2-year deal, it's got to be worth more in year 2 because the player is sacrificing some potential market, exposure where he can sign an unrestricted deal and make a few more dollars. I like the fact that Matthew Darche is being patient, is not rushing to sign these guys to, the Pierre Engvall type deals where your bottom 6 players are signing 7-year contracts. I like the fact that we are slowly but surely and patiently getting to all of these players and signing them. And if you'll recall, at last week during development camp every day, or as we discussed, Darche indicated that he was close to signing all of the Islanders' RFAs. Well, Ciplakov remains the only one left. The fact that he decided to file for arbitration doesn't mean they're not close. It just means that if they don't reach an agreement, if I'm the agent of Maxim Ciplakov and I didn't file for arbitration, that's negligence on my part. I have to do that. So hopefully it all gets taken care of. And again, I like the way this is being done overall. Gatkam back in training camp on the 1-year deal. Tsyplakov still needs to be signed, but we are, moving in the right direction to just make all of these moves settle in for an off season where we're going to have a pretty good idea of, who the Islanders have, who they don't have, and where this team is going. And that is great to see. When we come back, and we've got a lot more to discuss, we're going to talk about something that has changed this offseason that is going to help the Islanders. It's something we've been talking about for a long time on this show, and it is great to see that it's changed on the island. We've got that. Plus, for our Islanders' birthday of the day, an overlooked part of 3 of the Islanders' 4 Stanley Cup championship teams who put in some really good offense and had a big impact on the team. We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes me feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Again, $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. I have to talk about this. There's so much going on this offseason with the Islanders, which is great and it's refreshing. But there's a fundamental change since Matthew Darche took over that absolutely makes me very happy. And everydayers will understand it because it's something I've talked about many times over the course of the last year or two. Critics said that the New York Islanders had, quote unquote, a country club atmosphere, that the players were too settled in, too comfortable. There wasn't enough competition for lineup spots, for roster spots, that, if somebody got into a slump, they didn't have to worry too much because there were a lot of other people. A lot of other people who were quality replacements that the Islanders could just call up and count on to take over that position. Well, after the moves that the Islanders made, adding a Jonathan Drouin and an Emil Heineman and a Max Shabanov to the forward line, and you look up and down this lineup, and all of a sudden, there is competition for roster spots, for lineup spots. You got the feeling, for example, last year, as long as the Islanders were in the playoff hunt, the extra forward was Matt Martin. He wasn't playing unless somebody got hurt, and even then they might have called up somebody from Bridgeport unless they needed someone to play that physical role. Once the Islanders were more or less out of the playoffs, Martin went back into the lineup, but the competition just wasn't there. Well, now players are going to have to fight for lineup spots. And it is entirely possible, depending on who plays where, that guys like Kyle McLean, Mark Gatcomb, Pierre Engvall may not have spots in the opening day lineup. Now, one or two of them could be on the roster, but that complacency that a lot of people felt had been part of the Islanders for the last few years, probably going away in a big way. Because, for example, at the end of last season, everybody thought that Callum Ritchie was going to be on the Islanders' opening game roster, barring injury, this coming season. Guess what? As of right now, that's not even guaranteed. He may start the season in Bridgeport. He may not. It depends. But with Matthew Barzal moving back to center, you go down the middle, you've got Barzal, Horvat, Pajot, Cizikas, McLean, and Ritchie as your top 6 centers. Now, the order could change. You could say Horvat is 1, Barzal is 2. They could, at some point, move on from one of these players. They could move one of them to the wing. There's a lot of possibilities, but that's exactly my point. There's competition now, and you've got to win your job. And it's the same thing on defense. You've got Romanov, Pelech, Schaefer, and George as your top 4 on the left side. Tony DeAngelo, Ryan Pollock, Scott Mayfield, Adam Boqvist as your top 4 on the right side. And you've got 6 defensemen who you're going to dress almost every game. That leaves, 1 player or 2 players as a black ace, but it also means there's competition for those roster spots and those lineup spots. And it means that if a player slumps or needs to be benched, you can't hesitate to bench that player because, like last year, okay, Noah Dobson turned the puck over twice in his own zone. Puck ended up in the back of the net. He's not going to get benched because you don't have anybody who you could fill in. Or, Anthony Duclair didn't get benched until the very end of the season with his struggles. And again, I think a lot of them were injury related, but realistically, you couldn't put him out of the lineup because there was nobody there to come in and take his place. There is more depth. There is more competition. Things have opened up. And if that alone, if the fact that there is no way for these players to be complacent about their jobs, and you take it a step further, these players who are here now, most of them, they were not brought in by Matthew Darche. Some of them were, but like Pierre Engvall, for example. Engvall, Lou Lamoriello, when he was the general manager, his reputation, you send Engvall down to the minors like they did twice this past season, it makes Lou look bad because Lou signed him to that 7-year extension at $3 million AAV. Matthew Darche did not sign Pierre Engvall. He has no attachment, no prior attachment to Engvall. If Engvall fails, it doesn't make Matthew Darche look any better or any worse. That also helps the competition heat up because the players will get to be, the majority of the players on the roster will be successful or not, will be in the lineup or not because of what they do or don't do on the ice, not because of how they were acquired, what they were signed for, and that kind of a thing. So competition in sports is vital to the success internally and externally. And the huge change that has happened this offseason under Matthew Darche will, I think, have a positive impact on the culture of the New York Islanders locker room, on the on-ice product, and I think on, even in Bridgeport to an extent, because those guys who get sent down to Bridgeport because they didn't make the team, but they are NHL caliber players, they need to play well to get their opportunity to come back if and when somebody else falters. So I love this change in the tone, in the atmosphere in the locker room. It is a move for the better for the New York Islanders, and hopefully it results in improved play on the ice, both on the island and in Bridgeport. We'll see what impact it has, but I'm confident that there will be some improvement as a result of this change. We have got more to get to. A revealing statement last week from Patrick Roy about Anthony Duclair. We'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, we'll have our Islanders birthday of the day coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So late last week, Patrick Roy, after prospects camp, addressing the media, and indicated, and this was mildly surprising, but I give Patrick Roy credit for the way he handled it. He said, after what happened late last season when Roy called out Duclair and called his performance god-awful and questioned his effort and his work ethic, that he still hasn't spoken to Anthony Duclair. And here's what Roy said, and I like what he said. He basically said, this is not something I want to do over the phone. I intend to speak to him as soon as we get to training camp, and this is something that needs to be done in person. And I think that is the better way to handle it. Maybe I would have liked them to speak in person before training camp. But here's the thing about Anthony Duclair. Well, there's a couple of things. Last season was a big disappointment. And again, I believe that injuries were a big reason for that problem, number one. But number two, the Islanders are in a position that you get Anthony Duclair back to typical Anthony Duclair numbers, which let's say would be 20 goals and 50 points, okay? And that's even maybe a little conservative. He might be able to do a little better if he stays healthy for a full season. But let's say 20-45 or 20-50. That is almost like a new addition to this team, because the Anthony Duclair that we wanted to see last year was not there for the New York Islanders this past season. He was injured after just 5 games, never really got his speed and his game back after that. And it's almost like adding him again as a free agent this year if you can get the healthy, typical Anthony Duclair situation on the ice. And he's a legitimate second-line NHL player when healthy. He may have to play third-line minutes on this team. And again, that speaks to the competition, to the depth, and to the improvement up and down this lineup. But first of all, Patrick Roy handling it well. And second of all, you can still hopefully salvage a productive Anthony Duclair this year if the injury was the key and biggest reason for his poor season a year ago. And I think it was a large component of it. And I am rooting for Anthony Duclair to prove everybody wrong, come out and show what he's capable of doing. So hopefully he will do that. He will get on the ice. You'll see the speed. And again, speed, as everydayers know, is something this team needed more of. And Duclair couldn't give it to him last year when he was hurt. And even when he returned, where that burst, which is so important to his game, just wasn't there. So I hope that this works out well, that Wah, who has known Duclair since juniors when he coached him, can heal the relationship with the player and mend fences. And it looks like Wah is intending to do that the right way. Speaking to the player in person, addressing the matter, standing up and saying, hey, I'm not saying I was wrong in what I said, but maybe I didn't say it in the right way or to the right people. I should have addressed it in the locker room. Whatever he's going to say, I am hopeful that these two people who have known each other for a long time can get back on the same page and get the job done to reset and give Anthony Duclair a chance to prove his worth this year in year 2 of his 4-year deal with the Islanders. If it doesn't work out, maybe you try to trade him. Maybe you put him down in Bridgeport. There are alternatives, and now there is competition. But I like this. Also got to throw this in, Patrick Waugh sporting the beard during prospects camp. Some pictures of Kyle Palmieri with his beard growing back. Nice to see at least that the players will have a choice this year. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not Anthony Duclair grows back his longer hair. But these are little things, just an observation. But hopefully the Duke and Patrick Waugh can get on the same page this offseason. Time now for our Islanders' birthday of the day. And Sunday was the 73rd birthday of former Islanders forward Anders Kallur. The Swedish native, 5'10", 190 pounds, joined the Islanders for the 79-80 season, but missed the playoffs due to an injury. Had his best year in 80-81 when he had 36 goals and 64 points. And he was very productive in the 1983 playoffs when he had 15 points in 20 games for the Islanders. Stayed on the island through the 84-85 season. Played in 383 career NHL games, all with the Islanders. 101 goals, 211 points, 149 penalty minutes. Add 12 goals and 35 points in 78 playoff games. That's almost an entire season of playoff action for Anders Kallur. And Kallur, he gave the Islanders some badly needed offense in the middle six and wasn't really, now for those who didn't see the dynasty years, he is underappreciated, really. One of his best games as an Islander, statistically by far his best game as an Islander, November 30th, 1980, Islanders visiting the Colisée in Quebec City to take on the Nordique. And in goal, it's Chico Resch for the Islanders. Michel Plus, the late, great Michel Plus, in goal for Quebec. And our Islanders' birthday of the day, Anders Kallur opened the scoring with an unassisted goal midway through the first period to make it 1-0. And then with Stefan Persson in the box for tripping, Kallur, our Islanders' birthday of the day, gets a shorthanded goal with a minute and a half left in the period. Bob Bourne and Dennis Potvin the assists. A minute later exactly, Kallur sets up Bob Bourne to make it 3-0 Islanders, and that's how it was after one period. Then it was 4-2 after 2. Anders Kallur sets up Butch Goring for a goal in the first minute and 12 of the third period. Bob Bourne with an assist. That extended the Islanders' lead. And then Kallur, with his 15th of the season, his third of the game, Butch Goring the assist at 5:49 of the third. Islanders go on to beat the Nordique 7-3. But look at the stat line for Anders Kallur on the road. He had the hat trick, the only one of his NHL career. 5 points. He was a +6. He had 5 shots on goal, and one of his goals was a shorty. So a big 5-point night for Anders Kallur, an underappreciated member of the dynasty years for the New York Islanders. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no offseason, and we're bringing you the biggest daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. You could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR-VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders throughout this busy offseason. And it's always great to talk Islanders hockey with you anytime. Everydayers, we are back tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have some updates on the Islanders' overall situation. And yes, we will get to some mailbag questions this week, so send those in. We've got a couple already in the till. And we'll start our player-by-player analysis of the Islanders' draft picks, so join us for that as well. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And, of course, let's go Islanders.